The video game Omori by developer Omocat is a title founded on a combination of psychological horror and JRPG elements. Despite me being aware that the "it's earthbound except depressing" joke that's thrown around like Megami from Jujutsu Kaisen, I'd say that oversimplifying the premise behind this game might be discrediting much of the nuance in how it addresses real-world issues. Omori excels at communicating its messages of depression's influence on the mentalities of several teenagers through beautiful symbolism, ranges of ingenious art styles, characterization highlighting the idea of togetherness that mitigates the tense grip that a clinical disorder has on the psyche, and a myriad of other poetic choices that effectively serve the themes of the game on a silver platter. It was skilled enough to relay enough context to grasp up front while also challenging me to interpret the motifs and subtext in a manner unique to myself, which made it easier to resonate with. I've completed my fair share of games that have lightly addressed depression, however, none managed to scratch the capacity of Omori's allegory and devoted as much poise in unpacking those concepts. A portion of Omori's brilliance occurs mere seconds after we load up the game, where we're greeted with the welcome to Whitespace, a void we've been residing in for as long as we can remember. Just as I started Omori, I was immediately taken aback by the nuanced bit of the narrative conveyed through the atmosphere as strange as this. It does not tell me anything. It throws me into the mind of a teenager and allows me to piece together elements of his situation without heavy exposition, and that's clever. This entire realm exemplifies a portion of the main character's state of mind completely disconnected from reality. It is characterized by a desolate tone of lifelessness and stagnancy, and above all else, escaping is only made possible once you take a knife in hand. Stepping through the exit transports us into yet another layer of the main character's mind. Neighbor's room, where our friends Kel, Aubrey, and Hiro are there to infuse this room with a lighthearted charm that was nowhere to be seen in Whitespace. The difference in the emotional state of this area is made apparent as soon as you survey the room. Friendly hues of purple and pink encompass constellations of objects like planets and tables, watermelons, a tentacle poking out of the ground oddly enough, the talking snake having a leisurely old time on colorful stairs, presents, and much more. This immediately placed me at a sense of peace where nothing could harm me, but then again, the sudden jarring transition between Whitespace's dreariness and Neighbor's room innocence creates an underlying concern that something about the main character's psyche is off, giving birth to the likeliness of coexisting worlds within his mind. This contrast offers us a background into the psyche of a teenager coping through stressful times. You know how his friends are there to drag him out of his empty feeling life, keep him company, and most notably embark on endless and zany adventures. Headspace carries on the same kid-friendly aesthetic as Neighbor's room, and it's where a majority of the actual gameplay transpires. Here, Omori meets up with the others, remaining silent as his friends banter back and forth. Aubrey and Kel's antics create a hilarious dynamic where they never stop aiming for each other's throats, and Hiro, the one who happens to be the character who stands out to me the most, is the most laid-back, level-headed, and mature, and has no shortage of hilarious moments as everyone in this world views him as a handsome devil skilled at any and everything, including cooking. The group of four shares a soft-hearted relationship where, despite their fallouts and disagreements, they'll still genuinely care about each other and will always lend helping hands when someone hurting in the group needs a shoulder to lean on. Kel and Aubrey often dwell on previous conflicts, but the petty squabbling is to be expected because they're kids, and regardless, the playful teasing and insults are never offensive enough to detract from the sense of camaraderie between them, and it's obvious that they're all woven together by a wholesome thread of unity. I saw them as a moral support system for Omori of sorts, and it came off as comforting in a way that granted me security during my time in Headspace. One bleak day when their photogenic friend Basil is nowhere to be found, the stakes of the adventure are set in stone. Omori, Kel, Aubrey, and Hiro would begin their journey surveying Headspace for their flower-loving comrade. The imminent danger didn't matter to them because the priority was to save the boy, and they had confidence in seeing this idea through. Our adventure here plays out in a similar fashion to other JRPGs on the market, where exploration is carried out in a top-down perspective. Enemies naturally roam the lands, and you can choose whether to interact or not, except this time running is actually possible without the need for a cocaine sandwich. Omori's battle system is akin to rudimentary turn-based gameplay, but the combat's identity comes in the form of quite literally playing with your feelings. The party and enemies can inflict ranges of emotions on each other of varying effects. Happiness increases the critical hit rate while lowering accuracy, sadness boosts defense alongside a decrease to speed, and anger adds onto the damage both dealt and received. Furthermore, specific emotional skills are tied to certain characters like Omori, whose depressing stories dishearten those tuning in, Aubrey's words of encouragement, and Kel, the one notorious for annoying his friends and even himself, which is hilarious to think about in the middle of combat. Manipulating these status conditions creates various approaches to boss fights while also paving the way for adaptation if enemies inflict them on you as well. I'd say it's akin to the Bravely Default series where opponents also play by the rules of the mechanics, and I like that because it infuses these battles with a spontaneity that keeps it engaging on both sides. Secondary to the implementation of emotions that serves as an integral part of Omori's combat is friendly follow-up where damage accrued from enemies contributes to a meter at the bottom of the screen that can be used to give party members extra attacks. It's a neat little additional flavor to the battle system that ties in a bit more decision making, and interactions between the friend group are genuinely fun to watch and interpret. However, a greater concentration of bosses and more challenging enemy design would have been much appreciated to flesh out the depth of Omori's action, and I would have liked if the battle animations were a bit faster, but it was still sweet enough to hold my attention for the entirety of my 20-hour playthrough, and factors outside the combat would also build upon my appreciation for the headspace segments of the game. Backgrounds and characters are illustrated as if lightly colored in by shades of pastels, and the childlike animation only enforces the nostalgia that the visuals spark within the player. A style such as this always reminds me of the innocent years I spent in elementary school, the last time I ever picked up a crayon with the serious intent to inscribe a life into a blank picture. It invokes a warm feeling, a giddiness that I can best describe as seeing my favorite fictional character appear on PBS Kids or Nickelodeon following a lengthy adventure at my local daycare. It's hard not to notice the brilliance in Omori's imagery, as it's not only distinctive but it doubles as a means to relay the atmosphere of Headspace, an escape meant to call forth memories of simpler times, a period where the imagination of a child is alone to roam free, oblivious to the cruel realities and responsibilities rooted in adolescence. Enemies in Headspace often stem from silly design choices that draw inspiration from kid-friendly concepts like human-like appendages stretching out of an animated boombox, a shark-plane hybrid, chomping watermelons, fish bunnies, and numerous other goofy monsters conjured by the main character's active imagination. The art direction is a facet of the game that can communicate the mood of an adventure, and in the context of Omori, sentiments of a blissful past were decorated in eye-catching detail. Music is yet another facet of Omori's design, donating its charm to an honorable cause. The relaxed presence of the piano in various tracks lends a dreamlike aura to Headspace, while the beat boops and higher notes of synthesizers play their parts in giving a gleeful innocence to the setting. The best battle theme among a compilation of amazing ones is Forest Frenzy, which features a lead and background piano complementing each other, forming a kind of vibe that's difficult to describe. Maybe it's a faint aura of the happiness and freedom we're meant to associate with Headspace presented by the energy of an upbeat track. It is pure Nirvana. When I listened to this, I was genuinely blown away by it, alongside another phenomenal piece, By Your Side, which dabbles into a peaceful tone reminding you that you are in fact loved, and given the context of the narrative, players who have finished Omori can fully understand why I'm shaken up right now. Omori's soundtrack beautifully conveys the emotions it's asking me to feel at every given moment, nothing short of stellar soundwork overall, and this fantastic music surrounds the entirety of the journey. Given this takes place inside the mind of a childlike teenager, it is near impossible to predict where your travels will take you. Every section of Omori's psyche is loaded with settings like a junkyard where sentient phones and tapes are seen casually floating around, or a castle governed by a narcissistic queen and her army of sprout moles gives the adventure a bizarre kind of variety. None of these areas feel thematically connected to each other beyond the idea that Basile could have been here, but that's okay, because we can't reasonably expect our imagination to be consistent, especially when we're dreaming. Our brain embraces information we gather in the real world, and once we enter that deep sleep, it mashes everything together into an adventure that doesn't always make sense to us when we wake up to process what the hell just happened. But sometimes we crave to return to that realm where we feel a grander purpose. For me, this fabricated universe in Omori captures that sense of fulfillment rooted in the dream world. Colorful monsters and characters, brand new vibrant locations to explore, my best friends and I roped into ridiculous scenarios, and lastly, agency and purpose assigned to us by an ultimate goal and even a plethora of side activities. We play the role of hero, we win all of our battles, we make progress, and most importantly, we're enjoying that life. Hopefully our subconscious mind doesn't conjure scenarios that are as mind-boggling and sluggish as any and anything related to Humphrey, but still, it's a world free from the clutches of reality. The sky is the limit in terms of the fanciful journeys mapped out, and despite all of this seeming ideal and understandably so, embrace that all of this is not reality. and after several hours dispatching criminals with the flashiness of a badass space cowboy, it'll eventually be time to leave this fake universe and accept our actual life. Upon rousing in the morning, you're asked to select one of two options to carry out your day. Stay holed up in your house tackling the chores that mother has laid out, or explore a faraway town alongside familiar faces. What you decide on each day has a tangible effect on the content available and the narrative direction. I'd recommend an article for checking out the branching paths as they're mapped, but for the sake of this review, we're going to break out of our shell of isolation and cherish all of these beautiful sunny days with our friends. The setting and circumstances of the storyline pave the way for a sizable amount of memorable moments, whether they're surrounded by a wholesome, quirky, heartbreaking, or melancholic tone. Most of Omori's time is spent bonding and reconnecting the threads of friendship that slowly weakened as a result of a traumatizing event that occurred years prior to the events of the game. Writing across the entire main cast is well structured throughout, and I found that the crux of their insecurities and interpersonal struggles spoke to me, being genuinely relatable or at least understandable to a high degree. For me, individual characters each served as a separate study on how people in a friend group process unfortunate events differently. Maybe it's blocking out the agony through involving yourself in school activities while putting on a smile. Maybe you're an optimistic person and move on faster than others. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. Or how about retreating to a newer, mischievous friend group for security and refusing to give older buddies the time of day because of the pain associated with the past? These are all pragmatic ways of coping, and as someone who resorts to disconnecting from people whenever facing turmoil, it hits home. I, similar to many figures in Omori, are flawed human beings, and it's not uncommon to take this idea of self-deprecation and use it to exacerbate our mistakes, making us feel worse about ourselves by the end of it all. However, it's crucial to realize that despite all of this, we have support systems and friends, family, or even hotlines that are there to remind us that errors in themselves are okay. In fact, they're needed to provoke growth as a person. The message we derive from those mishaps though, how we learn from them and improve so as to not repeat them, is leagues more critical in terms of both our mental development and relationships crafted with others. Omori's narrative greatly illustrates this point, as we're given enough emotional dialogue and subtext to understand their characterization before and after the pivotal time skip, which attaches us to every one of their stories, capturing their internal development. The coping, disputes, hesitation to actually discuss the root of their discord, heartfelt scenes, all of it is displayed with a nuanced charm that makes them all feel that much more organic and impactful overall, and ironically enough, these fictional entities come off as real teenagers that made me reconsider how I attack setbacks in my own life. In between those sincere moments lies the chance to get acquainted with a lot of faraway towns' landmarks and such, whether it's the park, bakery, or pizza place. There's a lighthearted charm following you around as you explore, and a quirky sense of humor coming from the idiotic, colorful hooligans that do nothing except create problems. Side quests can be found at all corners too. I was delighted that they stacked plenty of additional content into a section of the game that can easily be missed. It's nice that Omori rewards your willingness to take your time and help the NPCs. Battles take place here too, but I wasn't exactly fond of them because this is the portion of the game where you're not actually rewarded experience points for winning, and even if you lose, the following events play out in the same way, excluding a few different bits of dialogue. It was thrilling to see a lot of the character sprites spring to life through animation complemented by the realistic backdrops, but honestly they felt pointless for me and not as fun. These fights feel rigid and restrictive by design, since they're competing with the multitude of approaches and creativity you're given in the dream world, which makes sense in context, but when it comes to gameplay, it just did not do it for me. Still though, I love the reality portions of Omori because elements of what you see here are often translated into what the main character experiences in the dream world, like his friends, locations, and enemies. It's interesting to be able to draw these comparisons, and it puts into perspective how ambitious one's mind can get, crafting entire adventures off superhero posters and interactions. Usually when the day is finished and it's time to return home by yourself, the psychological horror emphasis kicks in. Terrifying ambient music, murky lighting, details in the environment, and flashes of shadowy imagery combine to create an utterly disturbing atmosphere, and Omori does an amazing job making sure that the player associates this uneasy feeling with the actual anxiety experienced by the protagonist. His worries manifest in the form of shady monsters referred to as somethings that plague the teenager. Confronting these sources of fear is the only way to move forward, and so he does it, quite literally battling his problems, which I thought to be a gorgeous method of connecting the motifs of the storyline to the gameplay. Furthermore, all of these frightening confrontations teach valuable coping skills to the main characters, like calming down and focusing. It seems like generic advice, but within the context of a teenager likely hallucinating, it's easy to forget to breathe and regather your thoughts when facing conflict, you know? Omori's enforcing of these ideas through these interactions tell us that our battles with depression or anxiety are going to frighten us, hell, it might even hurt. However, it's only through accepting that something is off and making an active effort to change via confronting the problem instead of running away that we have any shot at developing the necessary skills to overcome what petrifies us, because if we persist in our journey, we will win. I'm going to be completely honest here. 2 hours into playing, I considered dropping Omori because of how unnerving its imagery was. I don't dabble into horror because the jump scares throw off my rhythm. Needless to say, that would have been the biggest mistake of my life if I actually stopped playing this, since I would have missed out on such a gripping experience. Exploration in the dream world is compelling given the imagination of its host's mind is allowed to roam free, giving birth to several memorable locations accompanied by zany characters and enemies clad in a dreamy, pastel-like aesthetic. The battle system incorporates the idea of emotions into conditions tied to stat changes, and although it's not overly ambitious like many other self-contained JRPGs, it adds to an established theme of headspace. The fact that our lead is so disconnected from reality that he's only capable of feeling emotions while enclosed within this fictional realm. Tying most of the JRPG gameplay to headspace is thematically appropriate because this is where Omori feels like he's making progress in his life, a bubble of complete agency playing the role of hero, in an adventure where he's the main character conquering all his foes. There is extrinsic progression here where he actually levels up and learns new attacks, as opposed to reality where there are no experience points or stat boosts coming from that. Instead, Omori interacts within the real world as a chance for the struggling teen to regain his sense of purpose in his life. Going outside and getting some fresh air, reliving the wholesome memories of the past but in short spurts, cherishing the time spent with your friends because time flies, opening your heart to them. And in those situations where there is nothing but yourself and a lingering fear tearing away at you, tell yourself that it's okay. Take a deep breath, process how you're feeling, and try to tame those inflated thoughts that might be eating away at you. I'm willing to bet that a lot of us has an unknown force within us that restricts our ability to build chemistry with those around us, or at least has us feeling regretful or useless in some respects. I mean, I certainly do. I've been going through my battles, and there were times where I myself would stare at the ceiling, clueless at how to take the next step. It's been difficult for me to bring out any strong emotions and actually feel hopeful towards anything that isn't an upcoming video game release, which is my version of escapism where I have a definitive role. I've felt empty at times, struggling to communicate how I feel, yet I've found that those moments when I'm forced to talk to someone who approached me, I end up enjoying myself a lot. Voicing my thoughts, laughing, everything in general is therapeutic, and it kills that barren void in my head even if it's a little bit. This is what Omori is asking of us, to respond to traumatic events by consulting a support system or coming together rather than disconnecting, because it's when you isolate yourself from others for long periods of time that you begin to sink into your own world, all while not patching up that nagging sensation of dread that takes you out of the illusion crafted for yourself, further exacerbating your real life. Changing ourselves isn't spontaneous. In fact, such a reaction can only work when we make an active effort to improve ourselves. This means breaking out of that bubble and opening that door of opportunity. Understanding that there is always someone out there who could be experiencing similar problems who likewise might feel at ease, knowing they are not alone. And that's Omori's main idea. All humans thrive off camaraderie to some extent. They cannot live a healthy life without assistance of some kind. Unification helps. It gives both parties a shoulder to lean on, memories to be had, and fulfillment in being in each other's presence. Because let's face it, facing our issues sucks. It's going to hurt no matter what. However, we're given our life because we're powerful enough to hop over those barriers, to persist through the challenges, and we all can if we give ourselves enough time. Although it's unreasonable to expect our problems to subside after a few hours, Omori clearly paints it as a day-to-day process, technically years if we're being real, but regardless of how long it takes, a semblance of solace is there to be had at the end of it all. Shutting ourselves away from that prospect via escaping to the fictional world, or in the worst cases even taking our life, cheats us out of the opportunity to actually grasp that true happiness. For Omori to demonstrate themes of depression, escapism, trauma, intrusive thoughts, and guilt in a way that highlights their harmful nature while also guiding players towards the grander picture of rehabilitation through fantastic storytelling, character writing, and symbolism, is the mark of a video game founded on a basis of not only entertaining, but also dishing out emotional messages that players can extract and apply to pieces of their own lives.